Frank, if you ask me, when I look back, what has the biggest challenge been? It has been that. How to get the balance right between the fiduciary role you play as a bank and the regulated nature of our industry, but on the other hand, trying to be a tech company and be in the context of the customer. I'll start with a fundamental principle that nobody wakes up in the morning saying, I want to go banking. You know, so people want to do different things with their life. You don't need a mortgage. You want to buy a house. You don't need a credit card. You want to pay for your meal. And so if you start with that first principle that people actually want to do different things with their life, and then you figure how do you, embed your banking products in what people want to do in the context of what they want to do, you start thinking like an e-commerce company. Very early, we started saying our role is to make DBS invisible. Embed ourselves, and today it's called embedded finance. So this was way before it was called embedded finance. I wanted to be the Intel inside of banking, right? And so you go and put this thing out there. And in working with that, there were two or three things, the balance on the other side. One was the regulatory environment. So what would regulators let you do? But the second was the trust environment. So how do you actually make sure that you don't get to a stage where customers stop trusting, either because of fraud, scam, cybersecurity, and crime? So, and sometimes they coincide, the regulation and the trust environment. On the regulatory front, we were fortunate that regulators, by and large, in Asia have been willing to lean in. They've been progressive, and they're willing to actually, work with the banks to find constructive solutions that allow the industry to progress. And we're fortunate because when you compare the regulatory response in our part of the world to the West, quite different. The regulators in Asia are willing to work with sandboxes. They're willing to work with experimentation to say how do you get the best out of the technologies and while not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so we got fortunate that many of the experiments we did were actually with the regulators. In Singapore, where we're headquartered, the MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, created something called a Financial Center Advisory Panel in 2015-16, where they got the e-payment companies, the banks, the regulator together, and we get together every 6 months to think about how we could leverage technology differently. So that was actually quite helpful.